Cassidy. I am the Assistant Director of Career Education, Career Advising at in the Center for Career and Experiential Education. I'm also a lecturer in the Psychology Department. Thank you to everyone for attending this major to career panel focused on psychology. And if your major isn't psychology, but you're interested in the field, this is still a great fit for you. I want to let everybody know that the panel is being recorded. And to start, I would love each of our panelists to introduce yourself. And then Ashley is also going to add the flyer to the chat for those of you who want to see the list of names and careers. So Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind starting with your brief introduction.
Okay, sure. My name is Elizabeth Barada. I am an alumni from the class of 1990. So, and I was a psychology major, and I just applied. Yeah. So, and right now I'm in private practice as a therapist for the last 10 years, but it was a lot of building up to that point. So, yeah, and I'm in the later stages of my career. I'm also a yoga teacher, and I'm also training or have trained as a birth doula. So I focus on women with postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. So that's kind of the direction I'm going. And I'm happy to be here and answer any questions you have.
Excellent, thank you. I am also going to ask everybody, this is the next question I'm going to ask the panelists, so just so you can think about it in advance, how you got onto where you are now, a little bit about your career journey. So we'll be excited to hear that. So Liza.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liza Izzo. I graduated in 2019 with a psychology major. I am currently working as a board certified behavior analyst. And I got involved in the field of ABA therapy. I heard about it in one of my psych courses undergrad. From there, I went to get my graduate degree and took a board exam, and I definitely helped me out with that. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And Chelsea.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I double majored. I was in class of 2017. I doubled majored in psych and sociology with a criminology, criminal justice concentration. Right now, I currently work for Superior Court for pretrial services. And so basically what I'm doing now is I'm meeting with defendants in the jail, conducting screenings and scoring tools to basically determine their likelihood to reappear for court, as well as their likelihood to reoffend. I give that over to prosecution and defense, and basically provide a report to them for their arraignment hearings, and then also do some monitoring as well, pre-trial. And yeah, I've had a lot of career changes though in such a short amount of time. Like I've only been at this job for 7 months. Yeah.
All right, I can't wait to hear that. And I love already that we're going to get to hear a little bit of a journey too. So the question, and it doesn't matter which order you answer this, and don't feel panelists, oh, did I miss any panelists who may have come in that I didn't notice? No? Okay.
Nope, we've got everybody.
So I'd love to hear, in whatever order you feel like jumping in, a little bit about your career journey after graduating URI. Like what position you started in, how did you get there, to your role that you're currently in, and anything that you feel would be any kind of peppering in some life lessons or career advice to our students in the room would be awesome. I think as I give you time to think about it, I'll say this. I think a lot of our students worry that when they graduate, the job they go into has to be the job they want to do forever. And we know that that's not really the case. And so hearing about your career path, I think will be so helpful to see that there's so many different ways to get to where you want to go. So whoever would like to start first, feel free to jump in.
I can kind of share what happened after my degree. To be honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do after I graduated. I Googled psychology related jobs and I found a behavior technician role, which is working one-on-one with kids with disabilities. So I found myself in the applied behavior analysis type of field. And from there, I immediately fell in love with it. I worked with clients with various intellectual and developmental disorders, some with ASD, Down syndrome, ADHD, and I really fell in love with it. So I decided to get my graduate degree in applied behavior analysis. And from there, now I oversee a client caseload. And there's various types of settings you can work in. You can work in a clinical setting, you can work in a school. So there's definitely many opportunities of client like range and population, client ages, settings, and there's just so many great things to do in this field. So I really did fall in love with it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Elizabeth or Chelsea?
So. I'll go. Well, my career path is long because I'm old. So, but right when I got out of college, I also kind of had an entry level. I worked as like a milieu counselor at a group home for emotionally kids, boys only, a boys home for who had like mental health disorders. So they no longer lived in their home with their parents. They lived in group homes. And I live in the state of Massachusetts. That's where I'm from. So, and that home still exists. And I work there in the house. So like after their school, helping with kind of structure and earning points and bedtime and all that, like kind of 4 to 10, in the afternoon. And it was a great experience. I didn't end up working with kids, but it was a lot of great skills. I had a great supervisor, but I did actually initially go back to school. I went to NYU. I thought I wanted to be a school psychologist. So I started in that program. It goes to a PsyD, but I finished at the master's and ended it because, much like many young people, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure I wanted to commit that much time. So I lived in New York City and worked in an agency that did kinship foster care. So kids who are removed from their home but placed with majority like aunts and grandmas. So I traveled all over New York City, from the Bronx to Harlem to the Lower East Side, and met with families and checked in and made sure they had what they need and all of that. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I really just had this break where I wasn't doing anything, and I lived in California. That's a whole other thing. But then when I returned to Massachusetts a couple of years later, that is when the arts stuff started happening for me. And I went to Lesley University here in Cambridge, Mass. And I got a master's in expressive therapies. And that leads you to be license eligible to be, I know in different states, the licensing for professional counselors is different. In Massachusetts, it's an LMHC. And so it's a 2-year graduate program, 60 credits and an internship and all that. And then you come out eligible to be a licensed therapist after a couple of years of supervision. So I finished that in 1999. And so since then, I've been working as a therapist in various roles. And in the midst of that, I got married and had children who are now in college, close to being finished. And so one of the jobs I did, which I loved for many years, was working 4 to midnight on call, doing emergency service evaluations in the emergency rooms around Boston. So it allowed me to stay home with my kids and be in the playground all day. And then when my husband got home at night, which incidentally, he works in the court, he's a probation officer, so understand what Chelsea's talking about. When he got home in the afternoon, I'd get paged and I'd be out all night evaluating folks who come in with suicidality or homicidality or psychosis or intoxicated, wanting detox. So I did that for about 10 years while my kids got to be a little older and school aged. And that was great experience to be able to quickly evaluate people, quickly evaluate like harm, risk evaluation. And I felt at that point I was ready to start a private practice. So from about 2010, I started slowly. I got on insurance panels. It's not rocket science. It's helpful to have a mentor for sure to help walk you through that. But really, all you need is your license as a therapist and liability insurance. And you get on the panels and they send you clients. So, and then more in the last few years, as my husband is thinking about retiring and we're kind of thinking about that, I've been a therapist a long time and I've been thinking about moving into other kinds of things, which is why I, did the yoga training and the doula training. So it's a great career if you're really interested in mental health, working directly with people. I work specifically with women at this point and specifically with postpartum issues, but I started out as a generalist and then on the other hand, psychology is so broad. You don't have to do anything in the mental health field. It really can do anything. And I think, it's true that people nowadays, they have multiple careers. So you don't have to worry. It'll unfold and you'll figure it out for sure.
Thank you. That was awesome. I also will have follow-up questions later.
Yeah.
Chelsea.
Yeah, so after graduation, I actually started as I worked in residential treatment at a group home as well. And so I worked mainly with people who were discharged from like a psychiatric inpatient psychiatric setting into more of an a residential treatment setting that was more long-term, and to kind of help them with their living skills and goals. Like I would have a treatment plan and I managed a caseload as well, helped with things like medication monitoring. I worked at that job for like 6 months, and I feel like I learned a lot in terms of like crisis de-escalation, which is I feel like a very good skill and a marketable skill to have if you plan to pursue like the mental health path. And I also worked part-time at a sex offender treatment facility. And that's at the correction facility in Connecticut. And so I also worked it was a men's only facility. And I kind of did helping them just around the milieu and stuff like that. So that was also that was like my nighttime job. And then I did that for about 6 to 7 months, worked both those jobs. And then I decided to move out to Washington. And that's where I worked in downtown Tacoma, and I worked as a supportive housing case manager for about 1.5 years. And what I was doing was I was working with youth who were chronically homeless and kind of helping them come up with stability plans. But I also was in a lot of panels too, and because the issue of homelessness is really, it's real out here. And so there was a lot of discussion about the housing crisis that I got to sit in on and take a part of, and, kind of discuss like with lived experience with my clients and stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then in 2019, so I did take a couple of years working before I decided to go back to school, and I wasn't even like 100%. But then that's when I went to graduate school at Seattle University. I got my master's in criminal justice research and evaluation. But then I also decided because I wanted to work and go to school, pay off some loans. It was very flexible because a lot of the classes are held like between 6 and 9 o'clock at night. And so I decided to switch to the private sector. So kind of like what Elizabeth was saying, you could do anything with a psychology degree. And so I worked at a private institutional review board, which is basically a review board that oversees the ethical part of research, which I'm sure you guys have learned about, the ethics and stuff in research. And so basically I was just kind of working as a customer service person. It was a remote job, and I did that for like 3 years while I was getting my master's degree. So I liked that flexibility. But yeah, I was just basically, all my clients were people who are conducting research, whether it be pharmaceutical companies, biomedical companies, and I was just doing that for a while. And then after I graduated, I had to do like a thesis and everything and have a good thesis committee. And then I transitioned to this job. Now I'm here.
Thank you for that. I love the variety in there. Liza and I are similar in that we have been on mostly one career path, and I love it. And Liza sounds like she loves hers. But I love I love hearing stories of people who've done multiple things and have changed career paths, even if it's just slightly. For the students in the room, feel free to throw questions into the chat, whether it's for a specific person or it's just a general question you'd like to have answered, because I feel like some of the things that our panelists have said already, for those of you that I know in the room, I feel like some of you might have some follow-up questions already. So don't hesitate to do that. Anything that we can catch during the presentation, we'll try to ask. So thanks for doing that. This question, actually, Elizabeth, I want to ask you before I go into some of the general questions. As I was mentioning to you before, some of the students in the room are really interested in art therapy. And so I know that you have that as part of your private practice. I'd love for you to talk about it a little bit more on what your experience is like working with your clients in that capacity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was in the expressive therapies program, so that kind of inhabits a lot of the arts, but I primarily use and have used art, sometimes music. I kind of play the guitar a little bit. And I guess movement, because yoga, I do a lot of embodied work with my clients. But you know, sometimes it's a great way to start, like on a first session with a client. You really don't want them jumping into all the things, and it's like time to kind of get to know each other. So almost like starting with a self-portrait. And so a lot of times using like collage materials and things like that that are not intimidating. So it's great to, I did a whole lot more art therapy in the past than I do now, but it's a great way, because words kind of slip and go, also to do a series of kind of art making together, how they see their struggle right now. I mean, there's lots of kind of models to use it, like making a bridge. You're on this side, you know, what would it take to get to the other side? And then like in reviews, sometimes like 6 months, you kind of going over the images is really helpful for the client to be able to see, like where, because words kind of are gone, you know, they kind of disappear, and clients often don't recognize some of their progress. So it's really helpful to use art as kind of a way to look at things over time too. So yeah, things like self-portraits, things like what's like internal, external parts of you, parts you keep close to you, parts you show everyone. Yeah, I think that it's been very useful, because generally, yeah, and some people really take to it. Some people love it and some people don't, and that's fine too. But yeah, it's a great tool to use. I mean, it's like what you do all the time with kids. So people don't often think about it with adults, but adults often enjoy it too and have a lot of fun, because they don't spend a lot of time using art materials, you know, so it's not as intimidating sometimes as talking.
I love that advice. So for the students in the room, regardless of the type of practice you have or the work you go into, even because so many of you are doing behavioral work right now, incorporating art or other expressive arts, like Elizabeth was saying, might be a great way to connect with your client, even if that's not a normal technique that you use. So I love the tips that we're getting here that you can apply potentially to professional life. Liza, we have, as I mentioned to you, so many students in the room. I think about maybe half the people in the room right now are doing internships in behavioral work, with varied mixed emotions about it, because as you know, it's hard. And so I would love to hear some of your advice for whatever it may be for people doing behavioral work, and how you've stayed with it so long, and what about it speaks to you. Any way you want to answer that, we'd love to hear it.
I mean, I graduated last summer, so I recently just started my career. But I've been in the ABA field for about 3.5 years now. And I just cannot think of all of our jobs are extremely rewarding, but I just love seeing my clients progress. And I work with a lot of clients with severe maladaptive behaviors that not only affect them, but affect their families. So seeing them progress and watching those behaviors reduce over time throughout their therapy is just so amazing. It's a really amazing thing to see. It's definitely not an easy job. But it's every day I come home, I'm just happy. I feel like I'm making a difference, not only with the kids that I'm working with, but their families as well. And I don't even remember what you asked, Erica, to be honest, but I hope that answered your question.
If you have any tips, what have you picked up over the years that you're like, hey guys, you need to do this?
Yes. Collaboration is key. I work alongside a lot of speech therapists, occupational therapists, because when you're in a psychology degree and you're working with various types of people, it's really important to collaborate. So you're getting so your clients are getting the best from both of you or from all of you, and you learn so much from collaborating with all these different people. So collaborating with people within your field and outside of your field is super important, I feel.
That was good to know. And I hope everybody's listening to that, because that's been a big topic of conversation in collaborating and being communicative with your colleagues and your supervisor. So thanks for saying that.
I'm just going to hop in here really quick, Erica. We had a great conversation between Phoebe and Elizabeth. Phoebe had asked Elizabeth about the school psychology grad program did she enjoy and what made her not want to pursue that. And so Elizabeth wrote back a little bit about making sure that she wanted to have a clear plan and she had a better understanding of that. Elizabeth, did you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, actually, I just wanted to recognize that Liza and Chelsea and I all have master's degrees. We went back to school and we went back for a specific thing. Like Liza is specifically an ABA, professional, and that's a specific skill set. And Chelsea going back for criminal justice, which is a different path. And mine, in my first round, I answered Phoebe. I really wasn't sure, and it's a good thing. My goal, that program was to become a school psychologist, which is like doing testing in school with kids who have learning disabilities, and I have never once, and one of my internships was at a high school at my second master's, but I don't work with children. I've never worked with children. So that was not a good plan for me. And then my degree, when I went back in my late 20s, when I went back to at Leslie, was to become a mental health therapist. So I think it's important to remember that with a general psychology degree, you can go in any direction, and don't return to graduate school until you need the specific thing you need to do the thing you want to do, because it's a lot of money. So you don't want to, right? And also the difference is, if you want to work in the mental health field as a clinician of some kind, like Liza and myself, yes, you need an advanced degree to make money. If you're going to be in the mental health field with a BA or a BS in psychology, you're not going to be able to afford to live as a young person in the world as it is, especially if you live in Boston. So that's important too. Like advanced degrees are great, but return to school when you know specifically what you want to do and if you need this advanced degree to do that thing. I think that's like kind of evident from our 3 different paths. Yeah.
Chelsea, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so and I 1,000% agree. I think I finished my program in like December 2016, and it wasn't until like I think it was like the summer of 2019. So I took a few years to really think about what I wanted to do. And I knew living out in Washington, and I kind of got to know like the jobs around and kind of like the skill sets that I needed. And so that's when I decided, because at first I was totally against grad school. I didn't want to put any more money towards school. Well, yeah, and it was something that I really thought hard about. And I also, my undergrad, I always thought like in order to go to grad school, you need a 4.0, you need to be like top notch. And I knew I struggled when I in my bachelor's career because I changed my major a couple times. And so I'm like, I'm not going to get into grad school. I'm like, and so I really took a few years off to think about it. And then I actually went for the only criminal justice program in Western Washington. So I knew how competitive it was. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to try it. And because I know I want to do this now. I know I need this skill set. And I got in and I got close with a lot of the faculty. And I was like, so like, why'd I get in and stuff? And they're like, well, your work experience and like, you know, what you wrote about in your statement of purpose. And so, you know, even if say you didn't have the best grades in your undergrad, or if you're you know, if that's something that you think about, I don't think it'll deter you if it's something that you really want.
Chelsea, I love that you shared that, because I see so many students, and I'm sure Ashley does too, who are so worried that they're not going to get into graduate school or feel like they need to go to graduate school immediately after undergrad, and how sometimes it could be a much greater benefit to wait. And like Elizabeth was saying, have a clearer plan on really what you want to do, because graduate school is like a major commitment, time commitment, emotional commitment, financial commitment sometimes. And so the waiting to know who you are and where you want to go, and to build up some professional experience to make you a more attractive candidate to the program. I love this advice. For the students in the room, I'd love you to use one of the reactions and like raise your hand or do a reaction for those of you who are considering going to graduate school. So we got a few people. Yeah. A few people are thinking about it. Okay.
In the meantime, while we're doing this, Erica, we have one more question from Fallon in the chat for everybody. And her question was for all of the panelists: did you pursue a BA or BS major at URI, and did either of them impact your ability to get a job? So the difference between a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science, and if there was anything that helped you get a job between either of those degrees.
I don't even know what my undergraduate degree is, and so I'll be out of this. I have no idea if it's a BA or a BS, but I'm sure, again, a general psychology degree is very, like, you know, lots of people will hire you and train you to do what they want you to do.
I got a bachelor's of arts and then a master of arts. So I didn't do a BS or an MS, and everything worked out for me. So
Yeah, and for my psych major, I was in the BA program, and for the sociology, I was in the BS program, and I got an MA as well. And I don't think it really affected my career.
Thank you, everybody. This is really helpful.
And Fallon, that was a great question, because that is another thing for our panelists. If you may remember, a lot of students are stressed like, oh, should I do the BS? Am I not going to get a job if I go BA? Are graduate schools not going to look at me if I do a BA? And so look at that. Come on. You don't worry about it if you have the BA. Feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. I am going to jump in. Anybody can answer this. Don't feel, for panelists, if you don't feel compelled to answer all the questions. But what do you currently find most rewarding or challenging in your current role? And Liza, I know we heard from you, but if you have more, don't hesitate. Oh my gosh. Hopefully everything's rewarding.
Okay. I mean, I was waiting for Chelsea to go, or
I'm still stewing here, but
oh, okay.
I guess find I guess like helping, because I guess my program is so nuanced. So basically what pretrial services is you it's this kind of like, it's a program that was kind of implemented to reduce the amount of monetary bail. So Pierce County did a study, and we contracted with another agency where they found, the amount of money that was being used for inmates who were sitting in custody on bail because they weren't able to post bail was extremely excessive. And it was to the point where they were actually getting credit time served, and they were basically sitting, they haven't been convicted yet. And I'm trying to think. So it's like basically that it was cheaper for Pierce County to actually bail them out rather than them sit in custody, because it's $90 an inmate per day. And so if an inmate is sitting in custody for 90 days until their trial, and that's like that's a quick turnaround for the criminal justice system, then, and let's say their bail is like $10,000, 10% of that's $1,000. It's, at the point the county is losing money. And so they implemented pretrial services. Part of what we do is we do check-ins with defendants while their case is ongoing, and we monitor them, sometimes electronic home monitoring, doing reports, and that to be in place of monetary bail. And, there is a lot of, I guess, issues when it comes to race, within the criminal justice system. And so I think part of what's rewarding is to kind of, I guess, implement that equity within the criminal justice system. I think it's still got its quirks and it's still got a long way to go. So I guess that can kind of be frustrating. Attorneys can be frustrating, but yeah, it's I think that's rewarding, like being a part of something new.
That was
Yeah, and I think I would say one of the rewarding things about my job is I feel like every day I could have a meaningful session with a client, like watching their own growth and progress. I feel so lucky that I have a job that is so meaningful and really supports people. And I've witnessed people go through so much. I've had a handful of clients for a long time, and yeah, it's just it's kind of an honor to be let into people's lives, the way they share with you. So yeah, it's just meaningful to sit with people, really. It's one of the few things that there's no phones, there's no distractions. It's still in person, barely, some online, some in person, but like we don't have a lot of those kinds of opportunities in our culture anymore, really.
I love that. Ashley and I, although the work is different, we work with students individually on their life path and career
Mhm.
path. And I can really identify with
Yeah.
what you said and how satisfying
Yeah.
it is. And as many of you know, I had a psych undergrad degree as well. You can take it a lot of places. I would love to go. Oh, you know what? We had a question in the chat from Bridget. Chelsea, did you ever consider an MPA to target racism and mental health policy issues within the system?
So I thought about it, but I leaned more towards the research aspect of like policies, of criminal justice research in general. Also, because I am like a research based person, and I've always wanted to pursue research. Even when I was in your class, I was like, I want to do research, but I also want to do criminal justice research. I may down the line, and I'm still considering getting a PhD. And I'm even still trying to further my skill set, like taking classes on like Python and ArcGIS, like these visualization tools. And that's what I'm kind of pursuing now, because I want to be able to do research and present that to stakeholders. But I do have a lot of friends and colleagues that have MPAs, and they're all like policy and legal stuff. And I'm like, no.
I love that. Also, I love that you mentioned doing the additional like one-off classes on the side. I think that's something that people don't think about. And I didn't say students intentionally. I think just people just don't think that that's an option. They get stuck on, you have to do this program or whatever. And so Chelsea, I'd love just really briefly, how did you discover those classes for the students in the room who were like, wait, how do you know about this stuff? And then after that, Liza or Elizabeth, if you've done something similar, we'd love to hear about it too.
Yeah, so I actually, my local library system, they do these like LinkedIn learning classes. And if you have a library card, you can sign up for like these modules like for free. And and so you get a certificate, but I'm still like actively enrolling and pursuing that. Yeah, and kind of like what you were saying, I was like, I don't need to get a full-blown degree on Python. I just need to know how to use the program, so I can just kind of, add that to my skill set.
Thank you, Chelsea. So we're going to have time for 2 more questions before we get into the questions from the students, if they have any. The last question, we'll start backwards so you can have it in the back of your mind, is our fun question, which is, what's something you wish you knew before graduating college? So if you want to let that marinate a little bit. And then the question that I'm asking now might look different for all of you, obviously. For the students in the room, what is some advice on what they can do now while they're still students to be potentially competitive for graduate school, potential career paths that maybe you followed? Things could be, what type of experiences should they have? What type of classes may they want to consider? Anything like that would be helpful.
I think it's super important to do your research, not only just online, but talk to people in these professions and get their input on what they do every day. I mean, like I said, you're going to be collaborating in a lot of these types of jobs. So it's really important to be talking to various people, getting their input on what they're doing and seeing if it's like the right fit for you.
Yeah, I think that I think after college, it's really important to get work experience. I think that if you're going to go into a clinical field, like you're going to be working, one-on-one with human beings, it's not a great idea to go from university to graduate school. You need to get out there a little bit, get some experience. It's, again, those entry-level jobs for people with psychology degrees who like they're kind of the ones we talked about. You work at a group home, you work in emergencies, like, you know, they're not in an, they're great to get experience, but I think there's a lot of benefits to just getting work experience in a lot of realms in your life because you've been in school like your whole life, and it's good to get out there. It's good to be able to like make a little money maybe, and you know, not be in school for a while, and then again when you feel a little clearer, and if you're going to go into a clinical field again, you know, figuring out what degree you need to work to, if you, you know, like they say, like if you want to hang a shingle, if you want to work as a licensed therapist in whatever state. But I think working, just working after college is an important step. Yeah.
Yeah, I can kind of agree. Like the job that, you know, and it's just like also to think about as you're graduating, that the job that you're in following graduation will likely not be the job that you're in for the rest of your life, and that's totally fine. Like when I graduate, I'm like, I'm gonna do this forever, or like, you know, it's not like that. Like you know, I viewed it as just getting experience once once I was there. It took me to move to Washington to kind of get more ingrained in what I wanted to do. And, you know, like their systems operate so differently than Rhode Island. And so I had to learn that and get work experience and do that. And that was when I decided to go back to school. So it's just important to kind of think of your avenues. You know, do you want to relocate? Do you want to do this? What are you trying to get out of your job? And then you can kind of use that, you know, use those skill sets to get into other positions. You know, saying that you've done this for X amount of years, you can maybe get into a government position, or, you know, you can constantly build your skill set as you're, you know, in these new positions.
Thank you. All right, before we go to the last question, because I thought of this while yeah, you were talking. Liza and Chelsea, you don't have to answer this, but is there anything you did while you were still a student at URI that you're like, so glad I did that?
Your internship class. I did that because
Good answer.
I did that 2 semesters in a row, which, so by the time, did I do that? I think I did that either 2 or 3 times. I don't know. But it was like by the time I graduated, I already basically had a year of work experience. And so that I felt like that was, you know, marketable to my job that I got. So, you know, it was kind of getting work experience while you're in school. I had to work, I think I worked at a cafe. And so I worked before school, went to class, then did my internship. So it was a lot of grind, but I was glad that I was able to get work experience while being in school and getting to network with people while being in school.
I definitely agree. And I learned a ton about resumes and how to format them from you, and what to put on it versus what not to put on your resume. And I think that's a crucial element because you're going to be using resume and adding to it. And you know, throughout your career. So I think that was really, I was glad that I took that class and learned that information.
I really promised to all the students in the room that I did not ask this for that. But I'm so glad you said that. They're doing for our panelists, the students in the room that I know at least have been so impressive and so amazing in their internships. And I know that so many of them are thinking about doing a second internship if they can. So they've been really great, and their resumes look really good too. So look at you guys, you're doing the right things. You're doing a good job. And one day you may be a panelist in for a psych class. All right, to our final question, and just to let everybody know, it's 4:48. What is something you wish you knew before graduating college?
I mean, I want to say a shout out for the young people like Liza and Chelsea, and the young people today, like they're so on all the things, and it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. Like some of the young women I see in their 30s, like there's a lot of anxiety because they're not sure they're doing the right thing. And when I went to college in the 80s, there was none of that. We didn't worry about what we were gonna do. Like we didn't worry enough. Like I didn't do anything to help my career or what I was doing next. So I'm just saying that because that's the culture. That was like the decade that I just went to school. I didn't do anything. So I think on the other hand, young people today are on the other end of that spectrum. So probably landing somewhere in between is probably good advice, but I don't, yeah, I'm not the right person to answer that question.
I feel like Elizabeth put it perfectly. Like I had a twin who went straight to grad school and I felt like I needed to do that. And I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad that I got the work experience and I got to familiarize myself with the field before going back to school for it. So I feel like I'm really grateful that I made that decision. And I feel like, I mean, as a senior, I was concerned. I was like, I don't know what my plan is after college, but everything worked out because you find a job and then you start to familiarize yourself with the field. And then like Elizabeth and Chelsea had said, like you fall in love with that part and then you go back to school once you're sure of it.
Chelsea, anything you wish you knew before graduating college?
I think the importance of being happy within your job field, it may outweigh the paycheck. And the reason why I say that is because, I work long hours. I'm at my job 50 hours, not 50 hours, but like probably around that, given the time that I'm there, I have a lunch break and stuff, but my commute and things like that, that's a lot of time devoted. So I think good management is important. And I think just overall, just happiness being in your job is important. And I think that's more important than salary.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, Chelsea. Money is great at a certain level to support yourself, but it doesn't matter how much, at some point, it doesn't matter how much you make. If you're not happy with the job that you have, it doesn't matter how much money somebody throws at you, you're going to still be unhappy. So, yeah, that's a really important piece. You shouldn't be grinding away at something that that's not for you, or that is not contributing to your overall level of ease or happiness, contentment.
Thank you, thank you, thank you to our panelists. This has been so interesting and cool to hear your stories and to get your advice. Students in the room, you've been so great about asking questions in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. We do have time for open questions now. So if you'd prefer to ask out loud some of your questions, or even students in the room, if you have any comments, feel free to unmute and you can ask your question or make your comment. You're also welcome to continue using the chat. So we'll give it like a second to see if anyone jumps in. Oh, good, Jamie. I love that you wrote that. Vanessa, you too. Oh, everybody, for our panelists, everybody was very pleased to know that a gap year was a good idea. Paige had asked, what types of jobs did you have after your undergrad degree before starting grad school? We heard a little from Chelsea. Yeah, I think we heard some of that, but anyone want to jump in? You feel like you didn't share? I think the question is, sorry, I'm going to jump in.
I kind of meant just more like, what were the titles? Like, what were the names of like the positions? Because like, I know like what you guys were saying, like the description, but kind of just more of like title wise, because I don't know what some of those would be called.
That's a great question, Paige. So when you're looking, job hunting, you know what you're looking for. I love that.
Yeah, my
Mm.
title was a behavior technician or a behavioral therapist.
Yeah, I think working in group homes like Chelsea and I did was like milieu therapist, or I'm not sure. Maybe Chelsea remembers better,
Yeah.
but residential specialist or residential counselor, maybe that's the term. Yeah.
Yeah, residential case manager was mine for one, and then I was a
Mhm.
client service aide at the sex offender treatment facility. Client relations specialist was like that customer service job that I was doing for a while I was in school. And then I was a care coordinator too, was the title when I was working with homeless youth.
Thanks, Chelsea. That's really helpful. Angelica actually asked a really great question, and her question is that she wants to go into the medical field and loves the field of psychology and feels that it goes hand in hand with becoming a good healthcare provider. I agree, Angelica. Do you think that there are jobs that are more healthcare involved that I can get with a psych degree after graduating from undergrad? So in any of your experiences in the industry so far, have you seen psych graduates that have been in the healthcare system that have really helped prepare them for those types of roles? I know none of our panelists are really truly in that kind of true healthcare setting. So that might be something we can explore together, Angelica, for sure, if you'd like to.
And Angelica, if you feel like it might be easier to clarify what you're asking, feel free to do that too. But if you're like, no, I said what I wanted to say.
No, just like I've worked in like direct support care, like with patients, and I'm trying to get like healthcare hours. So more just like, are there any other jobs that you would like see that you work with like patients and more like vital taking or like documenting, like more like healthcare stuff instead of like the, I don't know how to explain it in a sense. I don't know. Like med distribution. I don't know.
I don't know, maybe healthcare research would be like a good fit, but that's not like one-to-one care, but I think it would probably be useful if you're heading towards medical school, but I don't know, I'm not quite sure.
Or Angelica, also more like psychiatric hospital settings too, or medical center settings might be more what you'd want to do. I know that I've had former students with their BA, BS who were distributing meds and working in that capacity, if that's sort of what you're talking about as well. That's something to consider. And like Ashley said, we can always talk about it more. Any final, oh, and Vanessa, thanks for contributing to the chat. Any final questions for our panelists?
I just have one. If that's okay if I say it out like loud. So like I'm doing an internship, I'm doing outreach and tracking right now. Like one of the clinicians I work with, she's the academic advisor at BU. And she talks like she's been telling me a lot about LMHCs and like how she kind of feels like that limits people. And so she's recommended like doing an MSW instead. I don't know if you agree or if you think that's more of like a personal standpoint, but she's definitely like come down kind of hard on like LMHC. She's like that really like limits you in terms of what you can do later on. So she's like, if you want to do something more broad, like definitely do an MSW.
That's a great question. Yeah, in Massachusetts, there's definitely a delineation between, well, MSW is national, right? Like it's a national degree, I'm pretty sure. And it's based on, it's a lot older. It started with like women's suffrage, has a lot of history with like justice, justice works and then it's also clinical, meaning like therapy, right? And hospitals, and LMHC is a newer degree. It's licensed mental health counselor. It's a professional counselor. Lots of other states have a similar, different acronyms, different names, and it's just clinical. Like it's a therapy. You learn how to become a therapist. So it doesn't have all that history. And in the past, more, but probably still, like hospital settings, if you want, like they will be hiring MSWs over LMHCs. It depends what you want to do. Like if you want to, and I think that's changed over time, although like I haven't actively looked for a job for a long time, but MSWs tend to be a little more respected. There's just like, it just exists. I'm not sure why. The clinical training could be similar. Like I feel like I was trained really well at Leslie. And I know like one of the big schools for MSW is Simmons in Boston, which is very popular. There is a little bit of MSWs get a lot more kind of credit. They might be considered first. It is a broader degree. Again, if you want to do clinical work, I mean, I don't know, but that there is definitely a difference. MSWs, they have a lot more history, and they will generally say that, like get an MSW, not an LMHC. Us LMHCs are kind of used to it by now, but like I've only been, the jobs that I've done before I came into private practice, they hire LMHCs or MSWs, like doing those evaluations in the emergency rooms. So that was a while ago. Those hospitals hired me as an LMHC. So that's a tricky question, but it's a really good one. It's hard to know exactly. Yeah, it might be useful if you're at that point to talk to both people, you know, but now as I'm in private practice, it totally doesn't matter. Like people are going to choose you because of like your qualifications and what, you know, the kind of populations you see in your experience. They're not necessarily worried about what degree you have for the most part.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for that great last question, Sarah. That was wonderful. And thank you to our panelists. Elizabeth, it was so wonderful to meet you. Liza and Chelsea, it was so awesome
Nice to meet you.
both again. It is 5 o'clock now, so we don't want to take any more of your time. So panelists, thank you so much for coming. For the students in the room, let's give them one final thank you.